To me, it's the Chris Paul comp. Does Chris Paul fit basketball-wise? Yeah, to me, he does. But is he a fit? That remains to be seen. Totally remains to be seen. Like, that's got to play itself out.
And are the Warriors going to – and this is where the Warriors have had difficulty from a basketball standpoint trying to figure out who they want to be. And what I'm getting at is are the Warriors going to change the time where Chris Paul's running the show, right? When Steph's off the floor but Chris Paul's on the floor. The times where he's running the show, are they going to change? Are they going to be more of a pick and roll, slow the game down oriented team? Because that's where he's had the most success. Or are they going to be hell bent on trying to play the same way that they've always played, regardless of who's out on the floor? Because they are going to, in my mind, have to be a little more complimentary of the things that he does well. Maybe not when he's playing with the big three plus Wiggins. Then you can play basketball, and I think everybody's so intelligent that it'll figure itself out. But when he's out there with Clay and Moody and Kuminga and Saric, well, you better be running pick and roll 85% of the time and letting him handle the ball and create for others. Otherwise, why do you have him? So I do think they're going to have to make a commitment toward almost being two different teams more than they've been comfortable doing in the past,
right?
For sure.
Well, let me throw this name at you about who fits, who didn't fit, blah, blah, blah. Like, do you think Dante DiVincenzo thinks the Warriors' culture is unbelievable? I don't think so. He didn't have a great year for it, right?
Well, he was around the wrong year. Now, if he'd been around 2 years ago, would he have thought? See, that there's some nuance there. Like, if you were on the team 2 years ago, you would have thought, "Wow, amazing." If you were on the team
because KD, they won with KD, and he still didn't. He thought it was
but the vibe was different over time with KD. Like,
you're talking specifically about 2 years ago.
No, but what I'm saying is when KD came in, the vibes were still. I think when Kevin Durant came to the Warriors, the culture, like the Warriors still had the 15-16 vibes.
Yeah.
It waned during Kevin Durant's tenure here.
Right.
Like like the first year it was A+ still. The second year it was maybe a B+. Sure. And they won a title. The third year it was, I don't know, a C. And or a C- or whatever. And like it definitely changed over the time. I think, if you were with the Warriors 2 years ago, you might think, wow, this is a great balance of good guys and complementary players. If you were here last year, you're like, my God, Draymond's a nutcase.
Right.
And Jordan Poole was always running his mouth. All of the things could be equally true.
Skinny Bob. Skinny Bob's in El Granada. Hey, Skinny, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Hey, guys, 3 quick points. I think, Steiny, you're right on a lot of things, especially Chris Paul. I personally think he's here to handle that ball and not turn that ball over, and he can direct. Curry can do everything. Draymond knows he's been slapped and, how would I say, butt slapped, whatever. He knows that he can't be throwing his crap all around this year. But also Curry, this underrated film that they got on.
Sure.
My sister and a godchild in Wisconsin saw part of it last night, and they say it's terrific. I'm optimistic. I think this is going to be a hell of a year. We're not going to turn the ball over, and Chris Paul wants a ring. And you guys are right on, and half your audience is also.
Thanks, Skinny Bob. Appreciate it. That's Skinny Bob, the golf ball man. One of Guru and I's favorite.
Oh, hell no.
So, I just, I'm just thinking about the Warriors and Chris, and here's where when we talk about Chris Paul coming to the Warriors organization, I'm not talking about him and Draymond Green getting into a fight. It's so much more nuanced than that. But you cannot tell me that there won't be some challenges to overcome with Chris Paul in that locker room with 3 or 4 champions, and he's always been. Has Chris Paul ever been on a team where it's not quote unquote his team, or at least where he's shared a team? Because I was talking, because Eddie Johnson, I heard doing an interview, and he said when Chris Paul got there, it became his team basically. Not that he was better than Devin Booker, but Devin Booker, it's Chris Paul's team.
Right.
Like Chris Paul is used to directing. So, Chris Paul, does he have to change? Do the Warriors have to be a little more malleable? Does Chris Paul have to just shut up and play? Can Chris Paul really be the same Chris Paul on and off the court? Like, I'm going to say no to that. Chris Paul cannot come to the Warriors and be the same Chris Paul on and off the court.
And I guess what I'm saying is maybe that could be a benefit to Chris Paul and the Warriors.
Possible.
Because,
I'm open to that.
I'm open to the thought that I'm open to the thought. Sorry,
no,
that caught me.
It didn't.
Okay, I thought maybe it did.
No.
And I know there's history that I do. It's been a while since I've been in here with you, but I know the history.
Back to Wiggins.
So what were we talking about again?
We're talking about Chris Paul. The Warriors could bring out the best in Chris Paul and vice versa.
I'm open to the fact that part of Chris Paul's failures, if you will, to win a championship or win consistently in the playoffs may be that there's too much on his plate as the first or the second best player, or as the first and the second personality in a locker room. Like maybe stuff does get a little weird with him as the leader of your franchise. Well, now he doesn't have to be that.
Right.
He can fit in among other much bigger personalities within the framework of the Warriors,
right,
and just have it be more about basketball. So I guess to me that's now, does that mean it's going to work? Not necessarily, but I think that's a means to where it can work and be beneficial to the Warriors.
Well, right. And I want to be clear here. This is where I think some people don't really understand. I'm not
like Chris Paul doesn't have to be a leader to Steph or Draymond or Clay.
Right.
But Chris Paul can absolutely be a leader for Kuminga if he wants to be, or Podziemski if he wants to be, or Moses Moody if he wants to be, or even Andrew Wiggins if he wants to be.
But
he's got to want to be, though.
They can be.
He's got to want to be. He's got to want to be kind of cool, leaving the three, do them, and it's on the other three to kind of include him. I think.
Thank you.
To a certain extent,
right.
I do. Like they have to be inclusive of his input as a Hall of Famer.
And you know what?
Like let's be honest.
Right.
He's you'd say whatever you want. Chris Paul's a freaking Hall of Famer right now. Dude is his own walking statue in a way, not with the Warriors, but as an NBA player. So are they going to allow his input as a Hall of Famer?
They better.
Yeah, and I think they will. If they don't, then
they also better look at him as kind of a champion. They need to look, and maybe this will rub Warrior fans the wrong way. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green have to look at Chris Paul like he's won a championship. Because to me, that was almost at the heart of the Jordan Poole thing. To me, I think Jordan Poole got back to camp after the Golden State Warriors won a championship, and he felt like, you know what? I'm finally a made man with these guys.
Right.
Not finally, but after 3 years. And I think Draymond, and maybe to a lesser degree the other guys, looked at him and said, you're not really there. You're a junior champion. You're still a junior champion. And I'm telling you, and I really do think that that's where some of the acrimony started. You better treat Chris Paul the right way. And that's up to the veterans, I think.
I gotta think they will.
I think so too, but
I think they will because in part they realize they need the help. They need the help. They need Chris Paul's help. Steph Curry for this next year needs his help.
Yes.
Draymond needs his help. Clay needs his help. So whether you love him or hate him, or it's somewhere in between, you better use everything positive that he brings to the table the best way you can. So yeah, it is on them to include him, and then I think it's also on them to empower him to empower the other players that are beneath those three on the roster.
Yeah,
because they haven't been able to lead and relate to those players. Like maybe Chris Paul can help those players in a way that the other three haven't been able to.
Yeah. CP3 is not a champion. That's BS. Steiny's delusional. Okay. I'll tell you what. Treat him like Jordan Poole and see how this all works out. Big three. Treat him like Jordan Poole. He's not Jordan Poole. Listen, here's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's going to be a problem, but for Warrior fans to not acknowledge that the Chris Paul dynamic is going to have to be figured out, and it might very well be a positive. It could bring out the best in Chris Paul. It could bring out the best in the big three, but it also could do in the season, flat out.
You're Mr. Literal,
yeah,
and so I do want to and I know where you're coming from. So I'm not coming down your road when I say this. I can't call Chris Paul a champion.
Well, okay.
Just from that standpoint, but again, but he's absolutely a winner.
Well, as long as
he is a winner.
Well, the literal, I said they better view Chris Paul as a champion.
Well, yeah,
because if they view him as less than a champion,
well, I don't think they view him as a reason why we might not win.
Absolutely not.
Like you can't. But I think a lot of the fans,
absolutely not.
But that's the difference between players and fans. I think there's a lot of fans who are like, well, he ain't winning it. Like we ain't winning it because he ain't winning it ever. Right. So he's going to keep him being on the team's going to keep us from winning it.
Well, that's a fan
standpoint.
No, that I don't believe.
Well, but there's a decent chunk of Warrior fans that think of it that way.
I mean,
I find decent chunk.
I do think I think Chris Paul needs to be really good for the Warriors to be really good. That I do believe. But things every once in a while get a little sideways, and something something happens, and Chris Paul's walking off the floor shaking his head, and like something that happened, Draymond sees it. What are you shaking your head at? What's Chris Paul going to say? Nothing, Draymond.
Well, it depends. What's he shaking his head at? Is he shaking his head at Klay Thompson taking a bad shot, or is he shaking his head at Jonathan Kuminga not cutting at the right time when he could have had a dunk?
Steiny wants the Warriors to treat Chris Paul like something he isn't. See, that's when it's frustrating to be on the radio and not really get what I'm saying. I'm not saying literally a champion, but Steph Curry better be as respectful to Chris Paul as he is respectful to Draymond Green and Klay Thompson. That's the bottom line. The bottom line is that Chris Paul better be respected every bit as much in that locker room as the big three.
Whether you're a champion or not, you're a future Hall of Famer.
Exactly.
And one of the best players ever, and one of the smartest players ever. So again, the antics and all the rest of it, that's one thing. But to me, there is a respect level that Chris Paul has earned